Hi, this is Randall here in Texas.
And I'm Matt, here in Michigan. Today, Randall and I are checking out the latest movie from Marvel Studios. We're reviewing Eternals. It stars Gemma Chan, Richard Madden, Leah McHugh, Angelina Jolie, Selma Hayek, Kumail Nanjiani, Brian Tyree Henry, Lauren Ridloff, Barry Keoghan, and Don Lee. It is written and directed by Chloe Zhao, also known for songs My Brothers Taught Me, The Rider, and Nomadland. Now, before we go any further, if you like this review, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Also, hit subscribe and ring that bell to get notifications on our latest videos.
Eternals tells the story of a group of immortal beings that were sent to Earth to protect and help human civilization flourish. After a global earthquake, their old enemies, the Deviants, are once again threatening Earth. But there's something about the Deviants this time around that is different than they used to be, and there are suspicions of an unknown danger that lurks in the shadows. It had about a $200 million budget, has received very mixed critical response, but above average audience scores.
Alright, Reno, for me, my first impressions on this movie is it's long, and it actually feels a bit long for me. I think this is one of, if not the longest Marvel movie that we got so far. And sadly, this movie didn't really grip me until like the third act. I think some of the characters and, some of moments in this movie are really good. But sadly, I wasn't really interested in anything until, or at least not for the first like 2/3 of this movie.
Yeah, dude, I'm gonna echo that. It's longer than it needs to be, in fact. That's the problem with it. Long movies aren't a problem. Endgame is entertaining, Infinity War is entertaining. Marvel's got long movies. This one just has long, slow spots in it that don't necessarily need to be there to help the plot. Which just gets me on to the next first impression I had was, could they have any more exposition in this film?
The sudden return of the population provided the necessary energy for the emergence to begin.
The film is practically all exposition, and honestly, the point of that is essentially hand-holding the audience. Like, oh, that they're not going to understand this story. It's too confusing, so we have to make sure that they definitely understand exactly what's going on. So that was very, very disruptive to my viewing experience of Eternals. That kind of just leads me kind of into the plot in general, with all this exposition that goes on to explaining the plot, and I still have questions, but the questions aren't regarding the Eternals in general. Most of the questions about this plot and how it revolves around the Celestials and what's going on in the greater MCU just leaves me to ask questions about Guardians of the Galaxy too. Like, wait, there was a whole bunch of different stuff going on with Celestials in that one, and I don't even know if this plot leads to anywhere that I need to care about. I guess that's the biggest problem when you have this big, expansive universe that Marvel has set up. You kind of hope that things make more sense together, and this one doesn't to me.
Yeah, for me, there was quite a bit of this movie that I just really didn't care about or really didn't know what to care about for the longest time. Plot and generally, like, how the story is and the story beats. This is a little bit new to me. I never read any of the comics about the Eternals and stuff, so I don't really know a whole bunch about the Eternals. But I've read other comic books that had similar, I guess, storylines or what's going on about, superheroes or what do you want to say, super people going to Earth and having a mission on Earth, but there's more to their mission than I was originally, led on to believe. And the story kind of, gives you kind of like little hints like, hey, we're not really telling you everything at the beginning, even though, like you said, Reno, there's so much exposition or whatever. And I think a lot of that too is because we have so many characters in this movie, especially with our Eternals, that we're really trying to, explain a lot about them and, when they go off and do things. This movie is kind of interesting because we have a lot of, like, present and, like, past. So we learn about, like, present day, and things are going on present day, And then we have a bunch of like flashback scenes where we're talking about the Eternals and like the centuries that they've been here and different times to help build our characters and stuff. So yeah, for me, a little bit uneven, and yeah, as I said in my intro, I was a little sad that I didn't really get invested into this movie until like the last third.
There are two things about the plot that bug the jibby jeebuses out of me, man. Uh, Number one, any story that perpetuates the ancient aliens theory of progress already has a huge demerit in my mind. And I realize it's a movie. I get that. But not everyone's going to take it like that. I just don't like anything that has to do with, oh yeah, humans, they needed that little push along and aliens helped them. Like, no, please stop it. And that's a big part of this movie's plot, and that's annoying to me. But probably the biggest thing about it from just like a movie standpoint, and especially a Marvel movie, it suffers from the lack of a real primary antagonist. Like you said, nothing's really given to you until the latter third of the film, except for all that exposition explaining everything about, their mission and why they're here and what's really going on in their past lives. And still, the bad guy is just like bait and switch kind of stuff that just isn't that interesting. I want there to be a bad guy that I can say, oh yeah, that person, they're the bad guy. And really, it tries to be, more tricky and thoughtful and ends up being kind of messy, in my opinion.
So, that kind of brings us on to like the characters and stuff too. And I think a big part about this movie is, like I mentioned, we have like so many characters, it's hard to really do all of them justice. And like you said, we don't really have, like that main protagonist, I guess, or antagonist too. Though we kind of do, I guess, a little bit with the story. It's hard to really, latch on to characters, in my opinion, though I have an exception. There's one character in here that I really liked a lot.
Gilgamesh, 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 Gilgamesh.
Kumail's character, whatever. Every time he was on screen, I really enjoyed all those scenes. But the problem is, we don't get a lot of that until, after like the first third or whatever the movie. So that's another part of the part is like, I don't really know these characters. So it's really hard for me to care what happens. Like, hey, each encounter, are they all gonna survive? If they don't survive, do I really care? So I feel bad that this movie doesn't have a whole lot impact. I don't really have many stakes in the game and stuff for this movie. And I think that kind of hurt my enjoyment a little bit. But, we do have some pretty decent characters when you get to learn about them and learn about their relationships a little bit more. So, yeah, I guess, half and half. It just takes a long time to really get into this movie.
For such a large cast, it's interesting that you don't really necessarily enjoy any specific characters. I mean, there's a couple, like you said, that are entertaining to watch for sure, but for the most part, this is not like Guardians of the Galaxy or some of the Marvel team-ups that have like huge expansive casts. This film they're all new to you. Chiefly, there's not a lot of comedy. There's some comedy, but Marvel's kind of got this formula of being fairly comedic, and this movie and these characters are a lot more serious than you see in a lot of different Marvel movies. But there is one thing that I do like. So these characters have been on Earth for 7,000 years, give or take, at the time that the movie takes place. And you see them grow as individuals, as people, and they grow into their own thoughts and their own feelings. And there's lines in here, although if you blink, you'll miss them, where they're like, hey, Earth is progressing slower than we had anticipated, which kind of leads into the later third where, they are becoming more individualistic, and why that's probably not something that was intended. But I liked that these characters start developing feelings for one another, and they start developing feelings for humans, and they start doing things after such a long time that's outside of their original mission, because that's what you would expect a real character to do given that much time span. They're not just going to stay laser focused on, oh, this is why we were sent here, basically.
when we have like superhero movies and stuff like this, I think really the ones that work are the ones where, hey, we have characters that have powers and not just like characters who are defined by their powers. And I think that's what took me a while to get into these characters. Like you said, for us to actually get those different characteristics and stuff from our characters and like their relationships and stuff. But when we start off, it's just like, hey, this person can do this thing, and hey, this person can do that thing. So that's the thing. All we really care about is like, hey, this person can heal and stuff. Like, not really like the stakes and stuff of them as like individuals. And it takes a while for the movie to develop that.
Yeah, but you know what? I'll go one. You said your favorite character, and if anyone was listening to my whispers in the background, it was Gilgamesh for me, man. I loved that, especially knowing the Gilgamesh myth. Like the actual myth of Gilgamesh is, oh my god, it's so awesome, dude. It's epic. And his character is so fun to watch, and he's such a badass, basically, and I liked his character a lot. So there are enjoyable characters here. I just think that for the most part they're kind of drab. That's all. So as Matt mentioned, I also don't have any real experience with this as a comic, so I don't know how well this has or has not been adapted from its source material. But the other genre aspect of it is action. And as an action film, it's interesting because there's so much exposition and so much downtime and so many slow parts that as an action film, I also think it kind of suffers a little bit because I'm not being entertained so much by the action that's happening. But when it does happen, it's pretty cool and fun to watch. And that is kind of like that latter third of the film. There's a lot more, superhuman powers and stuff like that going on that did bring up the pace of the film quite significantly. So once you get into the action scenes, they're great. But a lot of it doesn't have action going on. And then I'm a little let down by that.
Yeah, kind of echoing Randall and stuff too about like the action scenes for these comic book movies. And I'm just gonna harp on what I was harping on too. The action and stuff is really good, but until you have like real stakes in the game or whatever, it takes a bit of enjoyment out of the action. But visually and everything, I think it all looks good and stuff when we have those action scenes and stuff too. But yeah, for like a 2-hour and 40-some minute movie or whatever, we have a lot of time in between where the action isn't going on. But, we've had quite a few of these Marvel movies, so I guess if it doesn't fit the Marvel mold, we get the action scenes, we get, like, the humor in it, and we get end credit scenes that build up to more of the Marvel universe for other properties that they're going to release at other times. So, under that criteria, I guess it fits all that criteria.
Maybe if we got someone who's watching who knows a lot more about the Eternals than we do, they can bleep bloop it down in the comments below. That would be nice.
Alright, so something I did not see coming in this movie. I did not expect Marvel to actually acknowledge a DC superhero character in this movie. And I think it's kind of funny too, because I was thinking one of the Eternals, granted, like Randall and I said, we really haven't read anything in the Eternals, so this is kind of our introduction. There's one character in there whose powers and everything are exactly like Superman, and another character in this movie actually calls him Superman.
Dad, that's Superman with the cape, and you're shooting laser beams out of your eyes.
I don't wear a cape.
So that means, like, DC Comics actually, exist in the Marvel universe kind of thing like this. But it's funny, it's right on point. He does seem just like Superman, except for he doesn't have a cape.
It's actually one of the more funny jokes in that section of the movie is, I do not wear a cape. So I know I've already said this, but I'm gonna say it again. I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record, but this was the most annoying part of the movie for me was the over-the-top hand-holding exposition. Our audience won't get this, so we have to explain everything. Listen, the plot's not that complex, guys. Come on. We're not talking Godfather level stuff here. It's a comic book movie. And more to the point, Marvel has experience making large ensemble movies that do not have this level of crazy, explanation going on in the background. You learn stuff through characters more than you get told it. So we know that Marvel can do show not tell, and someone must have made the conscious effort to say, no, this time around we're gonna break the Marvel mold and we're just gonna explain absolutely everything through dialogue. And sometimes you need an exposition dump because your plot is like over the top and I just don't know what's happening. Tenet, for example. But in this movie that was not necessary. So I didn't see it coming, and I wish it hadn't have come, honestly.
Another point I want to say, kind of what a point you had earlier too, or alluded to, the fact of having, aliens impacting human development stuff too. There was a scene in there that really put me off that I wasn't expecting where, not to give anything away, there's like one character that like creates stuff and it's like, hey, look, I developed this machine. Oh no, humans aren't ready for that. It's too soon or whatever. Oh, okay, well here is this lesser machine to help humans at this time. I absolutely did not like that scene. If you like that scene, fine, good for you. But for me, it kind of lessened my experience of it and wasn't something that I saw coming.
Yeah, it's like we didn't do anything for ourselves at all. Period. Nothing. Get that ancient alien crap out of here.
All in all, this movie is alright. It's just a bit too long and just took too long for me to really get invested in the story or the characters in this. But you know what? There are some characters in there that I did really enjoy. And you know what? It does set up with our end credit scenes other stuff for the Marvel Universe. But sadly, I think I'm actually more interested in what other stuff could come in the future than actually continuing on with like Eternal stuff.
So I'm glad you pointed out some of that stuff. Like for me, the movie is not bad. It's not a bad film. It's just doesn't necessarily fit in the MCU as well as I would have thought. And maybe a couple movies from now I'll eat those words, and that's fine. But as it sits right now, part of the problem for me is we have the ending of WandaVision and the ending of Loki, and this everything's building towards this Kang the Conqueror storyline and what's going on there. And I'm trying to figure out, well, how does this fit? Even the ending stuff that they tease with, their after credit scenes and their mid credit scenes, like, okay, fine, sure, that looks fun and interesting, but where does it go inside of the MCU? And that's important, I think, when you're watching a Marvel film and they are putting them all in the same universe, that they do in some way have to make sense together. And this one doesn't make that much sense to me. That's my 2 cents. Time will hopefully tell me if I'm right or wrong. But don't forget, we want to know what you guys think. Are we right or wrong? Let us know down in the comments below. We also have other YouTube videos, new movie reviews, flashback movie reviews, TV series reviews, and some deeper dive discussions.
We also have a Facebook page. Be sure to check us out there. Put a bunch of posts on there, some from our fandoms. We also post a day before our videos come out to let you know the topic of that video. Also, be sure to put us on your schedule. Our videos come out every Monday and Thursday. For now, I'm Matt here in Michigan. Have a good day.
And I'm Randall here in Texas. See everyone next time.
Next time on No Market Media. Please consider checking out some of our other videos.